Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome back to another episode of Rewire to Inspire. This show where we'll dive into self-love, learn tangible ways to rewire the brain, and discovering your soul's purpose. The goal of Rewire to Inspire is to encourage listeners to begin doing the hard work, to get curious and open to maximizing your life. Our mindset shapes how we live. Depending on life events, traumas, and personal experiences, our mindsets are all vastly different. However, one thing we all have in common is the ability to rewire our mind, to change the narrative, and to pivot our lives. I hope you leave each episode with the belief that you are so worthy to live a life true to you. I look forward to chatting with you every single Tuesday and Thursday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am very excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 155. If you missed my last episode, number 154, we talked all about do not make this common mistake. What that mistake is, you'll have to tune in to find out, but I can preface that it is around having intentions and the power of having intentions, but you'll definitely have to check out that episode to learn a little bit more. For today's episode 155, you guys, this one is going to be coming straight from my heart, straight from my personal experiences, and something that I have dealt with my whole life. AKA, I have struggled with this my whole life. I have done episodes on this in the past, and I know that this subject is one that always does really well. And I know that when a subject does well, it's because it's something that we can commonly feel and know that a lot of us struggle with. I know that when a subject does good, it's because people are struggling with it. And so today, based on the title that you guys seen, we're going to be talking about the benefits of speaking your truth. I had to really take a moment for myself, and I wrote down minimal things to prepare for today's episode because I wanted it to mostly come from my heart, but I did want to talk about some benefits that I've been feeling when leading into speaking my truth. And what I mean by speaking your truth is those moments where you can feel in your gut, in your heart, in your soul that your voice is not being heard. You feel like you are suppressing how you are actually feeling. Maybe you lied about how you're actually feeling. And are you someone who struggles to stand up for yourself, to speak your truth even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. And as I was sitting here reflecting on this, I'm like, okay, I know for myself personally, the reasons in which this exists for me. I encourage you, if you are someone who struggles to speak your truth, to ask yourself why. Why do you have a hard time standing up for yourself, for speaking your truth? Because what that means when we speak our truth is it can lead to uncertainty. And I think it's the uncertainty that causes us to be overwhelmed. Because if we are uncertain about how other people are going to react and respond, and we have a past that maybe we've been shown that with uncertainty can mean we can get hurt, that can be a vulnerable place, that can be a scary place. As we grow older, our mind has formed the belief that if I speak my truth, if I stand up for myself, there will be repercussions for this. There will be a negative outcome for this. And so we get really, really good at suppressing and suppressing and suppressing and holding it all in because all we're really trying to do is keep the peace. We have to reflect, though, for ourselves of knowing that when we're keeping that peace, we're keeping that peace for everybody else around us. But how is that leaving you feeling internally? How does that leave you feeling inside? And I'm 24 years old, and I have only really begun to speak my truth now. And by now, I mean literally, quite literally in the last couple of months. So I want you to know that you are so not alone if you struggle with this. It is unfortunately a very, very common wound that a lot of us share. And I want you to know that it can get easier and it can get better over time. But I also want to validate for yourself, and I want you to validate for yourself where this comes from. I know for myself personally, a lot of this comes from my childhood and comes from partners that I have been with and experiences I have gone through. And again, This probably for you comes from experiences that you have gone through. I've unfortunately been shown many, many, many times that if I speak my truth, it will either be neglected, it will not be validated, it will somehow get turned around on me and gaslit. And so at a very young age and leaning into adolescence and then into adulthood, I was shown all these reasons of why speaking my truth was a negative thing. What that did was crush my self-worth, because that led me to putting everybody else's needs, wants, desires, thoughts, beliefs, whatever, ahead of my own. And now that I'm beginning to really do the work, I've said I've done the work for the last couple of years. I think it's only been in the last year that I've really been ready to do the work, because I think before that I had so many blinders on and different biases, and I was still in toxic relationship and environments. And so I think it's been in the last year that I've really kind of taken these blinders off. And I'm like, if the one thing that I preach the most and that I'm the most passionate about is self-love, where am I not showing up for myself in the lens of self-love? And this was the first thing that came up, is speaking my truth. Here's also what I want you to know. The right people will respect you more for speaking your truth than for suppressing how you're actually feeling. Because here's what we got to look at from an energetic standpoint. If you're feeling a certain type of way, okay, energetically, and you know what that feels like for you, for me, I know that that's a lot of anxiety. I feel it in my heart. I feel it in my gut. I feel icky. I start to dissociate. I get really disconnected. And what I do is I suppress it. So pushing it down into my body. That energy literally has nowhere to go. So it's just sitting there. And what that's doing is it's leaking slowly throughout my day, throughout my week, throughout my month. And this is when subconscious things start to bother us. And we're like, I don't know what's wrong. It's an accumulation of all this shit that you have suppressed over your life. And I want you to pause right now and just ask yourself, is there an uncomfortable truth that I'm not speaking that I can validate and acknowledge right now in this moment? And I'm not saying go speak it right away, but ask yourself, is there something that I have been holding within, I haven't been expressing, and I've been avoiding? If something comes up, I then want you to ask yourself, has this been affecting me more than I've been validating for myself? Has this been surfacing without me realizing it? I never realized that when I would have an experience where, and I'm someone who loves critical feedback. I love constructive feedback. I love hearing, like, what am I doing wrong? How can I improve? Like, how can I shift? How can I adapt? Like, I love feedback. It is one of my favorite things in the world. But one thing I know about myself is that it's the delivery of somebody's feedback that makes or breaks me. If somebody talks to me in a certain tonality, I instantly shut down. And the reason for that is because I've suppressed so much of my emotions into my body that is like the tipping over. I'm trying to think of that is the straw that broke the camel's back, if you've heard that saying before, in those instances. And I'm like, okay, this isn't an issue from this instance that's causing me to shut down. It's an accumulation of all these times where I've suppressed how I'm feeling. 0 to 10. What are you also like on the receptive end of that? Do you have a hard time when people express their truths to you? How does that land with you? If criticism is something that's hard for you to take, you probably also struggle with self-worth. We need to acknowledge and validate for ourselves that all these things come from experiences. They don't just surface and exist for no reason. I want you to know that how you respond, how you deal with this is for a reason, and you need to acknowledge that for yourself. But also, and I had to do this for me too, I had to say, at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to deal with that. It is my responsibility to improve on this for me so that I can maximize my relationships around me. Because the right people, like I mentioned, want you to express your truth. They don't want you to suppress it. They actually care. This has been a huge mirror for me, being in a new relationship with somebody who actually wants to hear my truths. My body's like, whoa, are you sure? This is new. And so it's also been kind of scary, because if you've only been on one side of this and then you kind of like dive into the new side, it can be really scary and overwhelming to go there too. And so also acknowledge that for yourself. Within all of this, my message is to be gentle with yourself while also knowing we do have to push ourselves. If you struggle to express uncomfortable truths, that's a sign that you need to do it more. That's the only way that you're going to improve. And so I wrote down 5 benefits, because as I've started to lean into speaking my truth, I've noticed these things come up for me. And so the biggest one, and the first one that I wrote down very effortlessly, was it validates your own emotions, which in return, you guys, is going to elevate your sense of self-worth. If you look at it and you think about it, if we do not validate our own emotions, which again typically comes from childhood, or if we've had experiences where our emotions were not validated, we begin to lose touch with them. We dishonor them. We think that how we feel doesn't matter. I've held that belief for so long in my heart that it doesn't matter how Jessie feels. As long as everybody else around me is okay, who cares? I can deal with me. Until it got to a point in life where I'm like, you know what? I can't deal with me, and I need to tend to me, and I need to love on me, and I need to validate her. Speaking my truth has been one of the most magical experiences for me, because it's allowed me to validate my emotions and know that what I'm feeling is okay. I am someone who struggles with dissociation when I'm overwhelmed. One of the best ways I'm able to help myself in those moments is to validate my own emotions. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Why am I feeling it? If there's a truth that I'm not expressing, if there's something that I'm feeling, that is my opportunity to do so. I want to share a little trick that I do with you guys that's been helpful for me, because I sometimes want to speak my truth and it's like I can't get myself to talk. It's almost like someone's holding my throat, because there's a part of me that feels like it is so unsafe to do so that my body physiologically will not let me. And so I think a lot of this comes from my basketball experience, where I have such a clear memory in my head of me crying, just bawling my eyes out on the basketball court. And I remember my coach was up in my face and he was just yelling at me. And I remember he's like, why are you crying? And then he asked the whole team, why is she crying? What is this? Suck it up. And then made me continue to run laps, continue to hammer me. And so in those instances, when I try to speak, I can hear him in my head. And again, obviously we all have varying degrees of where this comes from for you. I know for me, this comes from trauma. And so in those instances, when I try to speak and I can't get it to come out, I have to say, hey, it's okay. It's okay that this is hard. I'm sorry that this is hard for you to do. And again, this is all self-talk that I do in those moments to calm myself down. And then one thing that I find helpful is I do a 1, 2, 3. I got triggered the other day. I have a past of unfortunately being cheated on a lot in past relationships. Today's very vulnerable and into my life, but I think that that's the only way that I can lead by example, is by sharing some of these things. And so one of my ex-partners used to do this thing with his phone where he would hold it a certain way, and then when I would look over, he'd kind of like quickly put it in his pocket and just be really suspicious. And in those moments, I did not speak my truth, and I was just like, oh, like he probably just was done on his phone, or oh, maybe there's something. Like I just would rationalize all the reasons in which it was okay that he was doing this. Plot twist, sort of, obviously wasn't okay and was doing things that hurt me at the end of the day. And so the other day, my partner now, he's amazing. He didn't do anything wrong. But because my brain associated the way he was holding with his phone with pain, I got triggered. And I knew in that moment, that was my opportunity to speak up how I'm feeling. We promised each other at the beginning of our relationship we would always speak our truth. That was a big promise for me to make because that means I need to face these things head on. That's also something I encourage you to do in your relationships if you feel safe to do so, is to make that promise to each other. Because if you've built that psychological safety within each other to always be able to express your truth, it also just gives your heart and your mind more permission to know that even though it's hard and even though it's uncomfortable, I got you and I'm here to support you through that. And so I did a 1, 2, 3 and I just expressed my truth. And was it perfect? No. Would I do it different if I could? Looking back now, yeah. But I tried and I validated my emotions in that moment. And guess what? I got the exact response that I needed, which was reassurance. And so all has been great. But if I had not expressed my truth and I just kept that within, I'm going to start to subconsciously begin to kind of resist him. There's going to be resistance between us. And then he's going to be wondering, what's going on? He doesn't know that that triggered me or why that triggered me. And if I'm not expressing that, guess what we do? We go within and we blame ourselves. Well, did I do something wrong? What's happening? Why is she pulling away? And I think that that's why there's so much division in relationships, is because we have all these subconscious things that happen from past. And when we don't take time to validate those, to heal those, and to speak our truths, they begin to show up in new relationships. And it's not that the new relationship is the issue. It's that there's past things leaking in that haven't been dealt with. And so I think of it like if you have like this big river and it has a bunch of oil in it, and every time that you express your truth, you're taking just a little bit more oil out, and a little bit more and a little bit more, until eventually you have this clear pond. But it isn't until we start to take those doses out, those truths out, that oil out, that we can start to have a clearer path. And so a 1, 2, 3 is something that's helpful for me. And so I want to leave that with you to see how that lands, because we will convince ourselves of all the reasons of why we shouldn't. Trust me, there was everything in that moment that's like, Jessie, this is stupid. I don't think you should say anything. Because again, I know that he would not do anything to hurt me, but because that part of my brain has been hurt and recognizes hurt and wants to protect me, which leads me kind of into my second point, which I'll just share right now, which is you stop being a victim all the time, because in that moment I was acting like a victim. I felt like I had just done something wrong. I felt icky. I started to self-blame myself. But by speaking my truth, I took off that victim perspective. And I just said, hey, I'm a human. Like, hun, I've been through some shit. That triggered me. Can we talk about it? And again, I didn't say it in that way, and I wish I would have now in hindsight, but now I know, and I have new perspective, and I have new awareness for myself that he is safe to express my truths to. But when we stop being the victim, and again, validate our worth for ourselves, it starts to become just a little bit easier. That victim mentality comes from suppression of your truth. We start to feel like everything we do is wrong, nothing we do could be right, we are not worthy to speak our truth, we are not worthy of happiness, we are not worthy of greatness, whatever. And I think that just reiterates for ourselves why we need to suppress how we're truly feeling. But the thing is if we don't validate for ourselves and we don't think that we're worthy of getting that respect, how do we expect others to give that to us? And how do we expect others to feel comfortable to do the same in reverse, right? And so that was the second thing I had, is it allows you to stop being a victim all the time. And again, within all these, validate for yourself why you are the victim, why you feel the need to carry that role. Is it your childhood? Was it your parents? Was it a partner? Was it insert thing here of where that came from for you? Tend to that and honor that. Number 3, the third thing I wrote down that's been helpful and a benefit of speaking my truth is it allows you to be more present. So I kind of mentioned a couple times within today's podcast that I am someone who deals with dissociation. And if you don't know what dissociation is, I guess I should have prefaced that a little bit earlier. It's basically like when you're driving to work or you're driving to somewhere you know really well and you get to your destination and you're like, how did I get here? I don't remember the lights, I don't remember the cars, you kind of just get to your destination. And it's like your brain's way of just shutting off. And when we go through severe traumas where it hasn't been safe for us to be physically in those moments, our brain's like, okay, we're just going to float away. We're going to just shut offline so that we don't have to be here. And I've shared the story before about how during my basketball experience, I would be so dissociated when my coach would be yelling. He would be explaining a drill. But because I was disconnected, when that happens, our prefrontal cortex, that logic part of our brain, goes offline. And so if our logic brain is offline and we are not comprehending, we are not even coherent. And I remember in those moments, I felt like that. I felt numb. I didn't feel coherent. I felt very distant, almost like I could hear him muffling in the background. And then we would go to run through a drill, and I would have no effing clue what he had just said. And so guess what? I would butcher the drill because I didn't know what he said, which then did what? Guess. Made the situation worse, and I would dissociate further. And so I had got myself in many, many, many experiences. I have unfortunately had partners that were just also very emotionally abusive, and I've just dealt with a lot of emotional neglect and pain and trauma in my life. And so I've had to disconnect and dissociate a lot. I'm very good at hiding that, or I was very good at hiding that. I'm more open about it now because I'm also validating that for myself and on the road to heal that and going to therapy again, and it's wonderful and it's great. But speaking my truth has allowed me to be more present, because when I don't speak my truth, I go into that dissociative state. And when I'm in that state, I'm not present. I had another instance. There's been so many. God love my boyfriend, because these things have been surfacing left, right, and center. But I also know that I'm aware of them and that I'm working on them. But we were at a coffee shop and we were planning a trip that we're doing at the end of the month. And for some reason, something took over me. And sometimes when you have dissociation, you have mental illness, you deal with mental health, these things can kind of just take over for no reason. Your body kind of just chooses for you. And I noticed myself, the thing about dissociation is I notice that it's happening and I know when it's happening. But again, that suppression of being able to speak, I can't actually say what's going on. And so I was just sitting there very disconnected, very just numb is the best word that I can say. And from his perspective, he's like, did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? What did I do? And then now we have this like very uncomfortable resistance between us because he thinks he did something wrong. I'm sitting there disconnected and I can't speak how I'm actually feeling. So after that, we had a very beautiful conversation and I opened up about these things. But again, that was from expressing my truth. And it can also be really hard to express your truth if there's a lot of shame or if you actually don't know what's going on. I consider myself very blessed in that I have a mental health background. I'm very trauma aware. I've read countless trauma books. I've studied trauma. I've studied mental health. And so I know in those moments what's going on for me. And so I'm able to express that. If in those moments you have no idea what's happening for you, I definitely encourage you to seek mental health support and to have conversations with someone who can provide some psychoeducation and educate you about how trauma affects the brain and the body. Because within that, shame can also surface. But so in that moment, by expressing my truth, it allowed me to be more present. It allowed me to show up differently. And so if you struggle with any of these things, again, I just want you to know that you're not alone. These are normal experiences and feelings to have if you've gone through just different traumas in your life. And I see you and I get you and I validate you. And I know that it sucks, right? Like it sucks. It's not fun. It's really hard when your body takes over and you feel like you have no control. You feel helpless. You feel overwhelmed. You feel like if you were to fully express these things, people will not accept you. They will not love you. You feel like a burden for expressing when these things happen over and over and over again. But I want you to know that the right people will be there and they will support you and that it does get better and it can get better. And I've noticed such a difference within myself as I've continued to just let it ride instead of resisting. It's almost like I can see the neural pathways in my brain start to reconnect and rewire. But because I had suppressed them for so long, they began to get almost like on ice. They were stuck. Let them thaw, let them move. It's uncomfortable, but that's how we rewire our brain and how we heal. Okay, number 4. It helps you feel a sense of release, which guess what? Allows you to show up as a better person. Because if we have all this suppression of emotions, guess what that does? That subconsciously is taking over us. That's causing us to be stressed. When we are chronically stressed, again, I've done episodes about this too, we're not present. Not only that, but our nervous system is in that overdrive state. When we live in that sympathetic state, that's literally killing us. Stress kills so many of us, but it is not directly labeled as that. It is labeled as all these other health conditions. But guess what? When we are in that sympathetic state, that overdrive, that overwhelm, that stress state, guess what? Our body's not working properly. It has to overcorrect. It's producing all these hormones everywhere and overcorrecting and undercorrecting and trying to figure it out. And then when we bring substances into that and we fuck it up even more, and we overwhelm our system even more and it gets more confused, we're just this big ball of like distortion and our body doesn't know what to do. Speaking your truth, again, is not going to fix all these things. Obviously, there's many areas and categories here that we need to deal with one at a time, one little nugget at a time. But speaking your truth allows you to just... Because I know for me, when I don't speak my truth, it's like it sits right here, the front of my brain. And it's all I can think of, it's all I can think of, it's all I can process. I'm trying to do something, I can't because I'm not present, and it's all I'm thinking of. When you finally say it, and you get it out of your body, oh my God, you can take a deep breath and you can thank yourself for doing it. And if there's a truth that you want to express, but you don't want to actually say it to someone, just say it out loud. Practice saying it out loud. Get it out of your body. I did a practice with my psychiatrist a couple of years ago where he got me to speak as if I was talking to my basketball coach. And we tried this over the span of like 3 months. And for the first couple of sessions, I was just like, nothing. I wasn't ready. I was too disconnected. But then over time, as I was able to just build a little bit more courage and heal and do work, this is what I want you to know. Like, I get it. I get it so deeply. And I was finally able to have some truths. And I said them. And I bawled my head off. And it was really uncomfortable. And it sucked. But I got some of that energy out of my body. Some of that anger out of my body. Sadness out of my body. Whatever that truth is that I asked you to think of at the beginning of today's episode, what could that feel like for you to say it out loud? By yourself. Speak it. Give yourself power. When we keep it all within, it disconnects us further and it makes us contemplate further. Get it out of your system. I promise you, you'll feel some release. It might lead to you crying. It might lead to you feeling more angry, whatever surfaces, know that that's also surfacing for a reason and tend to it. See what it feels like to actually get it out of your body, especially if you've never had capacity or been shown that you can do that. It's a really empowering exercise to do. And if you feel uncomfortable or overwhelmed doing it yourself, I definitely encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional to doing that with, to practice that with, because it is really, really empowering. So that is number 4. And number 5, last but not least, this one's kind of a byproduct of the rest, but it makes you mentally stronger. When we can show our brain that we can do something through exposure, and we can show ourselves that we can do something, that is a new neural pathway being formed in our brain. Every time you do something new, get outside your comfort zone, there's a new pathway being formed because it's new awareness for your brain. When you begin to speak your truth and show your brain that it's safe to do so, it begins to recognize it as such. Begins to recognize like, oh, I can do this. That wasn't so bad. Or maybe that was bad. Maybe that was hard. But now I have new awareness that I can do it. That's the biggest thing, is I don't think sometimes we believe that we can do it. You can. You just maybe never had the opportunity, the chance, the permission, the capacity, whatever. But I hope that you know that. Again, I've said this like 6 times because I really want you to know that the right people will be there to listen, honor, and support you. And I'm sorry if you've been around people that have not shown that to you, that have not honored that for you. But those people do exist. And sometimes we just need to find them and lean on them and trust that we are not a burden. That is the biggest narrative that plays in my head all the time. Jessie, you are such a burden. You need to suppress. You can't say all these things. No one deserves to have to deal with all this. This is your baggage. This is your stuff. And some of that is true. Yes, it is my responsibility. But it's also okay to lean on people that love us and care about us to help us guide through hard times in our life so that we can equip and better ourselves, so that we can show up as better people, individuals, partners, mothers, friends, sisters, whatever, so we can show up better. And you are so worthy of that. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. The 5 benefits of speaking your truth, a little bit about my story. Again, I'm trying to lean more into speaking from my experiences, because I think when I started this podcast, there was a lot of subconscious reasons of why I was starting it and messages I wanted to get across, but I wasn't ready to share a lot of things. And now that I feel like I'm truly at a place where I am not only comfortable, but actually okay with sharing these things, and I think that if anything, if they can help even one person, that's good enough for me. That is good enough for me. If I can help one person even not feel alone, I got you. And I care so deeply for you. If no one's told you today, I care so much about you. You are so worthy. You are so capable. And it can and will get better over time with the proper support and love. So thank you guys so much. I hope you're having an incredible, what are we today? When this episode comes out, we are going to be at the end of August. So that means Thursday's episode, oh my gosh, is going to be in September. So I will talk to you guys all in September, which is absolutely absurd to even say out loud. But thank you guys so much. I look forward to chatting with you then. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next episode. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.